Hello everyone and welcome back to another Stratagoy video. Today we're doing an in-depth guide on my favorite Spiteful Tree Rev. She's called Drycha Hamadreth, maybe you've heard of her. She's an absolute beast and I'm so looking forward on doing a guide on her because she's absolutely my favorite model in the SYLVANETH range. For this video specifically, I'm doing it scriptless. I want to try this out whether it's also of a high quality. Because this is a lot less work for me. So guys, please do leave some feedback in the comments. Do you like this kind of stuff scriptless? Do you prefer the guides to be faster and with a script? Any feedback is welcome, honestly, so don't feel bad for being honest. But without further ado, let's begin. So for this guide, we're looking at the Warscroll first, then we're looking at her role in the army. We'll go over some basic tactics and then some tips and tricks, which I think you'll find very interesting for this guide. But first, her Warscroll, obviously. As always, we start with her basic stats. The great thing about this Warscroll is, well, everything basically. Her move is fantastic, 9 inches. She has 10 wounds, but she doesn't brackets, so that's a huge bonus. And she has a 3+ save. Her damage is also very reliable now. Her range on her colony of Flitter Flurries has decreased from 18 to 12, but they are just as good as they were before, but the slashing talents have gotten much better. Okay, so for her abilities, she has 3 abilities, and obviously she's a caster, so she also knows a specific spell. The first of her abilities is called Deadly Infestation, which probably makes her good, I believe, together with Mercurial Aspect. Unmodified hit rolls of 6 for attacks made with Flitter Flurries or Squirmlings inflict a mortal wound instead of normal damage. This is the basic kind of approach to mortal wounds you usually see on attacks, and you might be thinking, okay, what is that good about this ability? Well, if you combine it with Mercurial Aspect, which is at the start of each battle round, declare whether Drycha is enraged or embittered. When she's enraged, Flitter Flurries have an attack of 20 instead of 10, so 20 dice you're rolling here. Or when she's embittered, her Squirmlings, which is in close combat, have a attack of 20 instead of 10. Basically, this means if you're a Lumineth player and you love rolling your 20 Sentinels, this is the same. For no additional bonus, okay, you don't get the Power of Hitch, obviously, but 20 dice with mortal wounds on 6s, that's amazing. In close combat, this is great as well, but you'll most likely use the enraged version, but we'll make a comparison about this in the basic tactics section. She also buffs friendly Spite Revenants wholly within 18 inches. She gives them +1 to their wound rolls, which is not great, but it always comes in handy. She's also a caster, which does impact her usefulness a lot. She can cast one spell. Her own Warscroll spell is absolutely terrible. It's called Primal Terror. It's on a 6+ with a 12-inch range. You roll 2 dice for each unit within range, and when it tops their bravery, you deal D3 mortal wounds. Very rarely will you use this ability, but there are times that it comes in handy, but personally I've never used this, and I play Drycha a lot. Okay, so for her role in the army, she fulfills 3 roles, and compared to other guys that we've done, specifically on Lumineth in this case, she kind of does these 3 roles automatically anyway, so you don't have to play her differently for any of these roles. So you just get all 3 of those when you pick her in, when you put her in your army. So first and foremost, she's a War Master. She always counts as a general next to your chosen general. Well, why is this great? Well, 2 things. First of all, she generates CP when your chosen general is slain, which might happen more than you think. But also her command bubble is increased from 12 for being a hero to 18 for being a general. So that's massively impactful. Her main role in the way I use her usually is a hammer piece. She has great ranged and melee damage. And because she's one piece that can move up the board and doesn't really need any backup, she's very easy to strike and fade with. So you teleport her up, we'll talk about this more in the basic tactics section. You teleport her up, you hit, you strike and fade back, and that's done. There's no retaliation. Keep in mind, her 12-inch range on her Flitter Flurries can be a downside, but with the teleporting of Sylvaneth, that's not really a bother at all. So this is great. She's also a buff piece. This is probably the role you'll use her least for, because she gives +1 to wound for Spite Revenants, which is first of all not her main purpose, and it's also not very useful for Spite Revs because they do inflict mortal wounds just like her on 6 to hit. So you end up skipping the wound step for your most important damage anyway. So the only time you're really using this ability is when you really want your Spite Revs to be good in Bounty Hunters and inflicting 2 damage. Okay, onto basic tactics. This is quite a lengthy part because we're going over all the glades, the seasons, spell selection, positioning, and we'll also compare both Mercurial aspect forms. Let's start off with the glades. Well, Sylvaneth players might notice that I've left one glade out of the selection here. I didn't include Ironbark because I will. Let's put it this way. I will start including Ironbark again when they've made it useful, but as it isn't right now, it is probably the most insanely bad designed ability that there is in the game, so I don't really ever see any unit being good in Ironbark, so that's why I did not include it in the Glades section. Okay, so how do we approach this? Well, we're looking at it from both ways. So we'll look at how she benefits from being in that Glades, but also does that glade benefit from her being there? Well, for Oakenbrow, there's really no synergy either way, so she doesn't really get anything, and her role, which is a hammer piece, is much more easily fulfilled by Durthu in Oakenbrow, so I would never pick this glade for her. Gnarloot, on the other hand, is a great pick. It makes her casting way more reliable, and she's an extra wizard, so she will benefit from that ability, and it will just come in handy much more often with her being there as well. So Gnarloot is a great pick. Hardwood ironically gets an A, and you might wonder why I have given it an A. Well, Hardwood right now is a very popular pick next to Gnarroot. What makes Hardwood so good is that the Kurnoth Hunters are a really good hammer piece in Hardwood. And with Drycha there, she's relatively cheap, and she's an extra hammer piece next to those Kurnoths. So it kinda takes a load off of your Kurnoths, so they don't have to carry the entire game on their backs by themselves. So Drycha is a really good extra hammer in that glade. Winterleaf is alright. You're not allowed to retreat when you're in close combat with a unit from Winterleaf. I like the glades, but I don't really see it being useful for Drycha at all because she's very fragile and you really want to use that strike and fade ability. So there's not really going to be any reason to keep your enemy in combat because you don't want to remain in combat at all. Dreadwood, obviously, I had to give a B because it fits so well with her theme. She's supposed to be from Dreadwood, but she luckily doesn't have that keyword, so she's free to benefit from other glades as well. But it still works. It mainly works because she buffs Spite Revenants, and Spites gain something from that Dreadwood, but she in herself doesn't gain anything from being in that glade. Harvest Boon, it's alright for the same reason it's good in Hardwood. It's an extra hammer. Honestly, I don't think if you're playing a Harvest Boon list that you really need that kind of playstyle because you're already this fast and you really don't need another piece making it more difficult to maneuver around the board because it's taking up your teleports. Having said that, I think she'll be good in any list, so being the extra hammer that she is, it's always nice having a melee focus list as you would be with Harvest Boon. For seasons, there's one I really don't want you to pick, but the other three are fine. So the Burgeoning, it's a decent combo. She gets the ward save, but honestly, Drycha usually wants to charge, so you're not really going to get that ward save very often. But it is handy if you fail your charge and you're stuck. The Reaping is a great ability overall, but not really necessary for her. That's why I would obviously recommend the Dwindling. It works great with her single cast. Having the ability to reroll your stuff is amazing. Everdusk, really, I would not want you to pick this. Why not? Well, it doesn't really mesh well with Mercurial Aspect, so it allows you to get in an extra hit on 6s, but remember that you can't really do 2 triggers on the same roll. So that hit is either going to be a mortal wound or an extra hit. And obviously you're going to choose the mortal wounds with her every time. So I would not advise this at all. When it comes to basic tactics and spell selection, we're thinking regrowth usually on her. Tree Song is also good, but it's a bit more out there. By that I mean you're going to want to be in range with Tree Song obviously, and remember that with Drycha we don't want her to be open to retaliation, so she's usually going to be strike and fading anyway, so she will always be outside of the Tree Song range. Now that doesn't mean she doesn't benefit from having Tree Song on her, obviously. It just means that it's way harder for her to actually cast it herself, so I would definitely go with regrowth here. It makes her that much sturdier. Some niche picks, well, Dwellers Below is always good in this meta. I think you want it in every army usually. If you expect to come up against a lot of hordes or it's not on any other of your casters, you could consider it on her. A bit more useful, I would say, is Verdurous Harmony. I think it's a great pick, especially when you play her in Hardwood. But Regrowth is my go-to on her. Deadly Harvest, I don't think you'll ever use it on her, but if you do, good luck. Okay, so when we're looking at positioning, there's 2 things I want to point out. First of all, I want to mention how you should usually play her, and that's by Guerrilla attacking her, but she's also great at Unleash Hell, so that's the 2 things that we want to highlight here. When you're using her as a melee piece, or even as a shooting piece, but not as a protecting shooting piece, I would say, keep her close to a Awakened Wildwood so you can teleport her forward. You can shoot because you're usually within 9 inches or just outside 9 inches, and then strike and fade backwards. If you're planning on doing this tactic, it's usually wise to choose the 20 attacks on your Flitter Flurry, so that's your ranged attack, because at least that way you're sure that you're getting the bonus even if your charge has failed. It also makes her very good at hero sniping, but more on that in the tips and tricks section. As I mentioned, she's also very good at Unleash Hell. In that case, remember, stay within 6 inches of the front of the screen, so you want to be within 6 inches of a place on the board where your opponent will have to go when they want to charge your unit. Choose Flitter Flurries and then Unleash Hell with 20 shots, mortal wounds on 6s is really juicy. Okay, so when to choose Flitter Flurries and when to choose Squirmlings. Let's first get something straight. So their profiles are identical and the buff is identical. You get 2 attacks rather than 10. So why does this matter what you choose? Well, Flitter Flurries is obviously great if you want to use her as an Unleash Hell in this round. And it's also just an all-round good ability. So I think when you're in doubt, choose Flitter Flurries, because obviously when you're tied in combat with her, you get to choose shoot before you charge, and even if you have to remain in combat, when you're still in combat at the start of your next round, you can still shoot with the Flitter Flurries. For the Squirmlings, well, it stacks better with commands in melee. That's an easy one. So imagine if you imagine being in a melee round for 2 consecutive turns, and you want to use all attack on her, definitely choose Squirmlings, because in that case you're getting the bonus both on your claws and your Squirmlings. It also circumvents Lookout Sir in combat, so when you're shooting a hero with Flitter Flurries in combat, they get the Lookout Sir even though they're within 3 inches of the enemy. When it's a melee attack, they don't get it, so that circumvents that. I would usually say when unless she's entangled in combat, choose Flitter Flurries, but if you imagine her being in combat for 2 turns consecutively, go for the Squirmlings. Okay, and now we get to the last section, and that's the tips and tricks section. I only have 2 tips for you today, but they're both really good ones. So the first tip is more of a reminder how good she is at sniping heroes. So imagine her being outside of 30 inches of any enemy wizards. You cast Arcane Bolt with her, you teleport her up with your Allegiance abilities, you shoot a hero within 12 inches with your Mortal Wound shots, and then you can still release the Arcane Bolt, ideally after you charge, so at the start of your combat phase for the extra D3 Mortal Wounds. A normal 5 wound hero without a ward save will die to this, statistically. So that's really nice. What she can also do, and what's a really nice trick if you have 2 teleporting units, for example in Hardwood when you're teleporting up your Scythe Hunters and you want Drycha to teleport up as well, it's a combination with Laoshan, the Soul Seeker. So this is an endless spell. A wizard can cast it, and when they're wholly within 3 inches of Laoshan, he can teleport that hero 18 inches further away, and she has to deploy within 3 inches of him and 9 inches away from the enemy. But now comes the good part, you're still allowed to move and charge. So just let that sink in. Her base is just small enough so that it can fit, and you can move her 18 inches, drop her 9 away, move her 9, so 6 if you're going for a target straight forward, and then just enjoy your 3-inch charge. So that's really amazing. Bonus points for then charging something that's close enough to an Awakened Wildwood to then teleport away. So that's really cool. And that's the end of this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, this was scriptless. Please do let me know in the comments if you liked it this way. It is way less work for me personally, but that doesn't mean that that this is the only option for me. So if it is quality-wise not as enjoyable to listen to, then do please let me know, because I want quality over ease of production for me and my subscribers. Also, if you enjoyed this content overall, please do leave a like and share. It does massively support the channel and really keeps us motivated to making more. If there's something I missed with the Drycha, because the book is obviously just out, please do also let me know in the comments, or find us in the Discords and let us know there. We have quite an active Lumineth community, and the SYLVANETH community is actually doing pretty well as well. So please let us know there. Do subscribe if you want to see more, and stay in touch, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!